Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to do a clay render of your model. At this point, your model probably has many different textures and subsurface scattering for the skin and possibly hair and emission and a ton of different things. So this is what my render currently looks like. There's a lot going on, and this render on this particular machine at 3,000 samples, full 1080, took 15 minutes. But if I just want to show off the actual modeling and not the materials, not the lighting, then what I want to do is a clay render, which you will often see in artists' portfolios as they're showing off their modeling skills. So what that does is it just strips away all of the color and fancy stuff and just lets you focus on the actual surface of the model. So it's actually pretty simple to do in Blender. And if I come over here to the scene settings, sorry, no, not the render layers setting, excuse me. In the render layers, I have this slot right here that says material. If I hover over it, the tooltip says material to override all other materials in this render layer. Now, I'm not going to talk about render layers. By default, whatever layers you have visible are the layers that are going to render, so that'll be enough for our purposes at this point. But what I can do is select a clay material, which is often just a flat diffuse gray material. In this case, I've got one here called light, which just refers to a light gray. And now, when I go, and I'm just going to render at 50%, and 1,000 samples because, or not 1,000, we'll go 500 just to speed it up. Okay, and now when I hit render, you can see it is just rendering that regular clay material. One thing to note about doing a clay render is if you lit your scene with emission planes, this clay material is also going to turn those emission planes into clay planes, which will be useless for lighting your scene. So in this instance, what I did is I took an equirectangular image, which I know I have talked and used before quite a bit. But I used, actually it was this image that I found on a search.creativecommons.org search, and I searched Flickr, and I found one that I liked, and I applied that to the mapped that to the world color to create my environment texture so I would light my scene. But now I've got this clay render that just shows the surface. Excuse me. Which is good, it's nice, and it gets the job done. But there is one way that you can give this just a little bit more depth and dimension, and that is using the Fresnel effect. So what I'm going to do is, in my materials, I've added on just my body mesh, I added a second material slot for my clay material. I don't have it assigned to anything on the mesh, I just have it there so that I can actually access it and select it. And then in my node editor, this is what I've got. So right now, like I said, it's just a really simple, it's a diffuse shader connected to the surface, and it's just a white color, or a very light gray color. But what I can do is I can add the kind of standard layer weight and converter color ramp node setup, so facing into factor and color to color. And now you can see how that affects the preview here. I'm going to reverse the order here. Whoops. Alright, so now the edges are going to be dark and the center is going to be light, and I'll set that to B-spline. And I kind of like that, actually, more or less like that. And then I'm going to change the black to, I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. And let's see what maybe we'll try a darker blue. see what that looks like. But now when I render that, you can see what that looks like. And there's actually one thing I'm going to do is, so there are render slots, so you can kind of keep track of different variations of your render settings. Okay, so right now I'm rendering this one in slot 1. When this is done, I'll go back and I will render the other version in slot 2, and so we can actually immediately compare the differences. Okay, that's just about done, and that's slot 1. And you can see that the edges, the faces that are facing away from the camera have that dark blue tint to them, and the ones that are towards the camera are more that standard light gray. So now if I switch to slot 2, which that's a different render where I used kind of a flesh tone instead of a dark blue. So actually, you know what? I'll switch to slot 3 and disconnect the color ramp, so now we're just back to that standard gray material, and we'll render that. And you can see the difference, and in a second I will compare them. Just about there. Okay, so this is just the standard flat gray material, and this is with the Fresnel factored in, so it's just a little bit of extra depth. It still doesn't obstruct from the showing off the form of the model, but just actually adds a little bit of extra definition. So that's an option for adding a little more interest to your clay renders. So you can do like a blue like this. You see earlier I did a render with this more flesh tone. That worked rather nicely. You got plenty of different options there to show off your model.